Hi there, Vibe Gardeners. Welcome to another episode of Vibe Garden Information, where this time I'm going to show you guys the tools that you need and the mechanism you need to be able to plant your seeds in the traditional soil-based seed starting technique. With that said, let's go. So, have you ever sat down and wondered why your seed start has not been succeeding, or if there's possibly something that you're not doing right to not have successful germination? So in this episode, what we're going to do is we're going to show you the most basic way of being able to start your seeds so that you can get it started, go from seed to being able to go outdoors in the most traditional way possible, the one that is going to be for sure as successful as it is done in nature. And although it may not be the most optimal technique, it is the one that will for sure succeed for pretty much everything out there. And this episode will basically start out by showing you the tools that you need from earlier episodes, from the how to plan your indoor seeding, seed starting environment, like here with my setup right here. And then it's going to pair that with the when to start seeds episode that talks about when you should be doing it. And with that, then we're going to be going into what is the technique of preparing the soil to be able to be worked. And then we're going to talk about how to make the soil prepare be plantable for seeds. And then we're going to have the seed planting in there. And then we're going to talk about care tips so that you can get the seed from seed to ready to go outdoors in one episode. So with that said, here we go. So first, we're going to talk about the equipment that you need. So the first thing you need is like the previous episode where I talked about seed starting equipment and how to get your practical setup. You'll need yourself a seed starting tray. I pick right here a transparent seed tray here. And this is extremely beneficial in that due to its transparency here, you're going to be able to see how the roots develop. This is a huge advantage for seed starting in that one of the biggest problems is going to be guessing when you need to pot up with the seeds, with your plants. And this right here is going to give you absolutely no ambiguity about what's happening on the root level. And this even have a little pop-up plastic here that will let you be able to pop um, the whole plant with the soil out of this little tray here because it's going to outgrow it before you take it out into the wild, or majority of the time you will. And it's also very important to have a watering tray here that you can hold it, and it also has a lid here that has a vent hole, which is explained in the practical setup episode. And the importance of having a black or opaque watering tray down here to hold it is that you want to keep the root from getting exposed to light as much as possible. A lot of plants, the roots does not like light. So by having it in here, you can have a watering um, situation going for this tray. So they can do bottom watering and also can trap the humidity in here. So this is, again, I'm going to link this product below. This is my favorite setup tool. And the second equipment that you need is something like this is a Tupperware that I had, and this is for preparing the soil. As you will see, next step for preparing soil, something like this is quite important. It doesn't have to be exactly Tupperware. It's going to be basically anything big enough for you to work with soil before you put it into the seed trays. And obviously, in the previous episode, we talked about having the right seed starting potting mix. So we're going to be using the Miracle-Gro indoor potting mix for seed starting. And this is going to be the only thing we'll be using to make it as simple as possible to eliminate any form of confusion here on what we're doing here. And finally, the last thing we need is a spray bottle to be able to water the seeds once we get it planted. And this is extremely important, as I explained from the planning your seed starting setup at home. And finally, and not least, we have ourselves the seeds. Yes, this is actually a bunch of parsley seeds, Italian parsley seeds I saved from last season. and I'll be planting them, though it's a little too early for it right now. I really don't mind getting more parsley at home in my home garden, so I can use it for cooking. So we're going to be using these. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually prepare the soil for seed starting. So we have ourselves the Miracle Grow potting mix, which obviously you can't see the full thing in the view here. So I'm going to basically just dump out what I'm going to need in here. And a lot of gardeners say you can probably just use a regular potting mix and still be able to pull it through. But like I said, for lack of variability, what we're going to do is we're going to get something that's actually marketed for seed starting. The first thing you want to do is you want to break it up, and you want to try to find any big chunks that's going to be in here. And also break all the clumps up, and to make sure that everything is even. So like I said, see, like this big chunk here, we're going to have to take this out. And the reason for that is that we want to give the most consistent texture that we can to the seeds to give it the right start that it wants. And by making the soil as consistent as possible, yeah, and the seed is a huge twig, got to get that thing out. Once we remove these, the soil is going to be the consistency that going to give the best chance for success for these seeds. And that way, the moisture contact, the contact with the soil is going to be the best for the plant as it grows. All right, so now we're done with sifting this soil. As you can see, this is what we got out of it. This is an extremely low amount, as I usually start with potting mix in the past, and I mix my own soil. But this Miracle Grow seed starting mix, as you can see, it really wasn't that much big chunks out of this, as they realized consistency is a big deal for starting seeds. And also they made this soil very fluffy and fine. And this is exactly what you want for your seed starting. And so this is going to be actually, this is why this is actually branded specifically for seed starting. And it is one of the best you can get out there for it. And as you can see, there's a little bit of vermiculite in here. And I think I also saw a little bit of cocoa coir in here. And these are the things that I generally put into my own seed starting mix myself. So obviously it's a little less than what I generally do, but I really feel like this is a mix that really is going to be quite successful coming up with what we're doing here. So the next stage, what we're going to do is we're going to take these seed starting trays. As you can see, I'm reusing my previous ones. I just washed them of the previous season's seed starting. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just take the soil. I'm going to just evenly throw it in here to make it flat. And don't compress or anything, just put it in here, kind of like cooking with measuring spoons. Just put it like this. And once you have that like this, what we can do is basically use your fingers to just press and compress the soil, as most seed will require about a quarter inch or so of depth of soil. And this is going to give that compression that you need to have a firm footing for the seeds. At the same time, you can basically put your seeds here, and then once you flatten out again, it's going to give you that exact, it's not really exact, but it's going to give you that depth that nature generally gives you. So that way right here, this is basically a very simple way to start out. And the next step is arguably the most important, which is putting the seeds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab myself like maybe a couple of them in here. And honestly, it doesn't matter if you overseed it, because at the end of the day, you don't know how many of them are going to actually germinate. So I'm going to basically take about 3 of them right here in this little bunch. I'm going to put 3 or 4, whatever it is. I mean, it's basically a pinch to make sure I get some redundancy in here in case some fails. I'm going to put it into each one of these little trays here. Some of them more than others, but like, I mean, you can be more exact in your method. And right there, you're basically setting yourself up with a bunch of seeds in here. And when it comes up, you'll have to eventually thin them. But right now, we're just basically putting the seeds in hopes that some of them will come up. Now that you have your seeds in here, you're going to take the soil again, and then you're going to basically just, like before, cover it with soil and just flatten it. And the difference this time is only give it a tiny little tap. Don't depress it like you did earlier. You want to give them enough compression so it's not going to basically blow away, but you also don't want to give it too much compression. The seeds will have too much to use too much effort coming out. So there you have it. This is basically how you put the seed into the seed starting tray. All right, so now that we have 2 trays of parsley here already in the seed tray, the next step we're going to do is we're going to take the spray bottle that we talked about and spray the top so that it is moist and gentle. And this is the important part. Remember how in the previous episodes we talked about how water basically activates the seeds and wakes it up to start germinating. So just give it enough so that it gets moist and be able to water down to the level at which you put the seeds. And make sure the water is not pooling, because that's going to basically drown your seeds. You gotta make sure it gets enough air. And the final step is to put on the humidity dome. This is going to give you the humidity control you need, and you want to keep the vent open right away. And what's going on here is that you want to make sure there's air going into it, which I'll talk about in a minute. Finally, I almost forgot to mention is we want to put this little instrumentation device in here. It shows you the temperature and humidity. Of course, as you can see, it got a little warm from my hand. Just pop it right in here. It's going to tell you the reading. All right, let me get us to a place we can read it. The humidity is, of course, dropping because it was right in my hand. But it's going to rise, I'm sure, as the water evaporates. All right, guys, so as you can see, this is how I basically plant my seeds in the seed starting tray here. And I hope that gives you guys an idea of how this works. So the main topic that I want to talk about with the care of this seed tray is going to be watering. Because that's one of the things that really is the downfall for a lot of people, including myself, starting out with seed starting. The one main thing you got to remember how we went into how the seed starting germination actually works, right? There's 3 elements that must exist every time we talk about seed germination. That's going to be water to wake the seed up, air to be able to let it get its energy to do what it needs, and then it needs a temperature to be able to let the seed basically get its enzymes, everything else working, right? So what's happening here is that the main thing here is that when you're watering, you want to make sure, first of all, the water is getting to where it needs to get. But the main other issue is you don't want the water to be so much that you're drowning the seed. It's not getting the next thing it needs, which is air. So the beauty of germination beginning is when it's still in seed state, you want to be able to use your spray bottle to water. Because one of the main issue is that when you pour with a spout like this guy right here, this watering can, the watering can is going to be a little too harsh for flushing water down into the soil. And a spray bottle is a very gentle misting technique, kind of like a gentle misting ring for the seeds. And as you can probably understand, a seed would love that significantly more than a downpour, like you would be simulating with that watering can. And that is basically how you want to start out. And the beauty of that too is that you can basically just touch your finger on the soil and you can generally tell if the soil is wet or not, because you're basically doing a surface watering. And once it starts sprouting, that's when the game changes here, where it also needs light. But also at the same time, the root starts developing downwards. And the root is developing downwards, you need to start using the water can and take those seed trays out of the bottom tray here. And then you want to water the bottom tray and do bottom watering. Like I mentioned, you just give it a pour water, put the seed tray in there, give about 5 minutes to soak up the water, and then just dump the rest of the water out, and then let the seed tray drain out. And that way what happened is that you're basically getting the water from below up towards the root. And that way you're basically promoting the root go downwards and where the most water is. And that's how you want to water. And one of the very main things you got to remember when you're using the watering is you want to use a not super purified water, like RO water or distilled water. Anything that is very low on dissolved solids, like chemical and stuff like that, you don't want to use that because that is going to start leaching nutrition from the water. And there's a lot of other videos out there. You can basically look on YouTube and people's going to talk about that whole entire thing. So what we're going to do is use the regular tap water. I know you're probably concerned about some of the chemicals in there, but the reality is soil is going to be able to filter some of that out. And it's definitely better than using RO or distilled water because that's just going to literally take the nutrition out of the soil. So now that we talked about water and how to manage water to get the seed started, we also alluded a little bit to air and how air works. So basically the main thing you want to do is you want to keep the vent a little bit open on top of your humidity dome. And if you don't have that vent hole, what you want to do is at least once a day, you want to be able to open the humidity dome, let the air in, and that way you can basically circulate the air in there so that the seed doesn't starve or get choked of oxygen. And that's one of the mistakes I've made in the beginning, besides watering too much and basically suffocating the seed. Before, also what I did was I didn't let enough air into the humidity dome and the seed ended up dying. So don't make that mistake. Make sure there's enough air getting in there. Another important thing too for a lot of plants is that there's going to be this element of getting enough warmth. So some of the plants for germination, they need a certain warmth to it. And if that is not enough, you want to be able to put a heat mat under it and be able to be able to basically alter the temperature to be able to get the plant started. You can use one of those no thermometer um, heat mat, and you can be able to get away with it because we have soil like what we have for the seed starting tray here. It's going to be able to buffer too high of temperature. And generally speaking, they're designed so that it's not going to cook your seeds. And that generally will work for things like hot peppers. And finally, with care, you really want to also look at where the seeds are placed. Even though right now it's still a seed form, it does not need light. But as soon as it sprouts, it's going to be looking for light for photosynthesis. And this is why I've actually got all this scrap wood here. They're not there because I'm just throwing things around. I mean, I kind of am, but what it really does is that it gives me the ability to change the height of the seed tray, so that way everything gets the right amount of light. Because right now, as you can see, I still got my garden container experiment back there. It has to require the light to be higher, so it's basically giving all the leaves in the garlic enough photosynthesis, but at the same time, it is at almost the highest point that those lights can be. So for when the parsley germinates, what I need to do is I need to bump the location of that seed tray up by putting those wood blocks where it is. I'm basically playing Jenga with my seed tray here using wood blocks. And you will see by if the plant is starting to look leggy, you know you need to raise the uh, tray up to get closer to the light. So the final topic is something that I'm probably going to have to spend a whole entire episode on later on, is when the plant gets mature enough and gets into the early vegetation stage, it'll start needing potentially having more nutrition because the seed starting mix for any kind of plant, generally speaking, is going to be a little lower on nutrition. And so eventually it's probably going to need a little fertilization. Now, granted, you can take care of that by potting up because eventually when it needs that, generally speaking, the root is going to be spiraling around the seed starting tray and called a root bound. And we start seeing the root mass start spiraling around the edge of the seed tray. You'll know it's time to start put it into a bigger pot. And when you do that, one of the ways of getting around it without using fertilization is to get a nutrition heavy soil, like something that's got a lot of composting there. If you want to go the organic route, or if you don't mind synthetic, you can start adding things like Merkle Grow or the Hydro Green indoor feeding mix. These are the things you can all kind of find. I'm going to put link below some of the product I use for fertilization, and that might be needed as you go on with these plants. But the other thing for sure, like I said, is you want to be able to pot up. Now, depending on the root sensitivity of these plants, you really want to look at different ways of potting up. Like I said, that's going to be covered in another episode, but that's going to be something that you want to consider as the plants get bigger and become more mature. All right, guys. So this episode, I really kind of went over the basics of how you can get the mechanics of getting seeds into soil in a way that's going to promote the best success of getting it there. And I also kind of talked a little bit about the challenges of caring for these things before it's ready to go outside. And I'm definitely going to explore a lot more of those as time goes on. And I'm going to have other episodes talking about potting up, fertilizing seedlings if needed. And then definitely I will have an episode on how to harden your plants when it's time for it to go outdoors, because you don't want to take this thing outdoors right away. And those things are all coming, and I hope you stay tuned for what's coming. So if you haven't, please subscribe, and you'll be able to get notification when these things come along. And with that said, keep gardening and keep vibing. Let's go.